everyone, and welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. We've reached episode 808. It's the Roland episode. It's January 29, 2025. I'm Sebastian Bake.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
Are you a MIDI fan? I'm Josh Walrath.
Yes.
And 808 is the same backwards as it is forwards. I'm Kent Burgess.
Brett is not here with us again. This is the second week in a row he's absent. This week he's sick. Last week he was traveling. Apparently wherever he traveled to, he got sick. So that was a poor choice. At this point, it just sounds like we're making excuses. Brett is alive. We chatted with him today, but he's not here.
He is definitely not tied up in my closet.
So once again, playing the role of the Steve Jobs disciple.
Right, he's in the closets behind me.
Is Kent.
Yes.
Brett, come out of the closet.
All hail Apple and their glorious chamfered edges. Steve Jobs is not dead.
Okay.
He just went home.
Okay.
Boy, have I got news for you later on.
And if you play the last iPod commercial before that was discontinued backwards, you actually hear a message that Steve is not dead.
What, the dead man don't wear plaid?
Yes.
Get another Steve Martin movie with Cyrano de Bergerac.
Great film.
Actually incorporating a lot of footage from classic noir cinema.
Yeah.
I'll definitely give it a watch.
We are trying to educate our viewers.
Yeah, we want our viewers to be more sophisticated, but not too sophisticated because then you won't watch the show anymore. Yeah. Quickly moving to our Patreon segment where we beg you for money because we can't keep doing the show without you. So go to patreon.com/PCPer. Be like Durs and Ryan M.
Durs?
You like those two?
Durs.
Josh,
Durs.
I think I have been wondering what on earth this is since I saw your cryptic post on Twitter a few hours ago.
Okay.
Please explain what Frickalicious
All right,
is.
so I went to Born in a Barn and I was awful excited because I knew they had a new special. And there was the Frickalicious. And the Frickalicious was comprised. Let me double check and get this straight.
Okay, hold on.
Double
is there
patties.
a picture? Is there a picture?
No, there's not, and that needs to be a story.
Oh, okay, hold on. I thought there was a picture, and I'm all messed up here.
Oh, there's a picture of what Caveman Jim had,
sign.
which is also very looking.
Yeah, now Caveman Jim actually had a good burger.
Yeah.
As you can see, the Frickalicious is a double patty topped with frickles, which are fried pickles, bacon, pepper jack cheese, and fry sauce. And I thought, you know what? That doesn't sound too bad. I don't mind burgers with pickles. And fried pickles are super tasty. And I got to my work with the takeout order, and I unwrapped it, and it's like, well, it looks kind of a little sad. And I took a picture of it, but I didn't post it. Then I took a bite into it. And it was deep red.
Oh,
Both patties. Deep red. And so then I attempted to take apart the burger and put the patties in the microwave to at least get them up to temperature so I don't die. And I put it back together, and it tasted awful.
You microwaved the burger. Of course it did.
Well, yeah, but what else am I going to do? Am I just going to chow through raw hamburger?
Fire up the barbecue.
I'm at work. We don't have a barbecue.
Well,
I guess I could have used the
efficiency.
toaster oven, but yeah. Well, anyway.
Well, probably a better choice.
I don't think that even just heating it up in a microwave and finishing the cooking process did anything to the flavor. The flavor was just not good, and I pushed through for about half the burger and the fries, and I just couldn't do it anymore. This is the first really bad meal I've had from them, and I'm sad and disappointed. And I talked to the owner, and he gave me a refund, but it's like, dude, your people have to actually, cook the burgers. and they just were not. It was not, kind of hot pink in there. No, it was very, very cool red.
Ugh.
And with, hamburger, that's I'm hoping that tomorrow is a good day.
Yes.
So yeah, it's the horror burger story of the week. Very sad.
So it is 5080 Founders Edition review day. PC Perspective actually has one of these cards. I didn't get it until yesterday afternoon, so there's no review finished here yet. But Tech Power Up is one of many outlets that has a review of this card. Tomorrow, we can start to see the add-in board partners and overclock cards reviewed. But the 5080, I don't know what expectations any of us had for this card, but based on the rumors that were out there, it was going to be a little faster than a 4080 Super at the same price.
Well, guess what? You were right.
The reviews have been very inconsistent with the reviews on this. I've seen some reviews where it is almost as fast in certain titles as a 4090. And then I've seen others where it's just almost identical to a 4080 Super. It seems I don't know. It's very odd. It seems almost like driver issues. Some people have had issues with these, with ghosting and artifacting that they did not have with the 5090. It's very strange. But yeah, it's
So
not.
there's kind of there's kind of a explanation for that artifacting. It seems like if you have a base frame rate of like 80 and above, then you have far fewer artifacts when you're using the multi-frame generation as compared to like if you're hitting 50. And I've seen some of the things that they've been talking about, and while it worked great at the 5090 because the base frame rate was so much higher when it was the 5080, and they were doing like Cyberpunk and the MFG multi-frame MFR anyway. MFG. Sorry, multi-frame rate generation. Correct.
Multi-frame generation. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and the higher that you have that, the more accurate those intervening frames are going to be. But if you're really low, the latency in between the two frames and what the AI kind of has to do, it freaks all kinds of things out. So a guy was riding around on a motorcycle and he had the gauge in front of him, and like the needle would skip, or the numbers would like flick into something not numerical. I mean, it was just not good. And it just doesn't have the horsepower to do MFG and DLSS4 stuff as well as something like the 5090, which is still a monstrous card, but it's not a generational uplift.
And that's upset a lot of people because NVIDIA has been providing those for so long. We're used to it. And they led with something that did. Because you can't say the 5090 disappointed. You can say the price is disappointing, but it is kind of interesting to see that this is the first card that I can think of in a few generations where the next generation replacement didn't completely outshine it. It is certainly better. It's got a little bit more going for it, especially the memory bandwidth. And
were you around with the GeForce 3 to GeForce 3 Ti 500?
I never owned any of them, but
okay, yeah, that was about the same lift. It was not,
which was
impressive. But that was back in 2001, 2002.
Okay, so not quite 18, but yeah, 20 some years. Yes, but it's been a while since they've skipped something like this, so it's interesting, and I couldn't help but bring it up in my little post, but one of the things that really upset people about that 4080 Super was the fact they just paid $300 more for the vanilla edition just just a few short months before, and it's not as fast as the cheaper card. One will hope that NVIDIA will not repeat this, but at the same time, I'm looking at it and like the little tiny conspiracy theorist in the back of my head is like, I don't know, is that suspicious or not? Although there's no way they drop the price. They could maybe make a $300 more one.
NVIDIA's in this interesting position where they don't have competition in this segment. So with the 5080 and the 5090, they can price it however they like because there isn't the successor to the 7900 XTX coming out this year. And it was surprising to me that they didn't raise the price. It could have been released at $1199. Now seeing that the performance is only slightly higher, it makes sense that they kept it at $999. Of course, you're not going to find cards at that price, but just imagine that you can buy a card tomorrow for $999. And it is
that
faster.
Is a dream.
If you look at benchmarks, I think it's time to start ignoring 1080 benchmarking. There's too many bottlenecks on the system side, even at ultra settings with 1080. So 2560 by 1440 and above, for me, for a $1,000 graphics card is essential. And tech power-ups, overall average performance at 1440 was...
It's 14 frames, so around 10%.
Faster.
Yeah.
That's about what we were seeing from leaks. Like the 3D Mark stuff is going to be best case scenario, but that's about 10% faster than the 4080 Super. We're talking about the 5080, and that's 10% faster for the same price. Yes, it's been 2 years since the 40 series launch, more than 2 years. But that's what happens.
But look at the 3080 to the 4080. There's a 3080 at 10 gig at 995 frames.
Yeah.
Right? That huge jump from the 3080 to the 4080. And we got used to that. This not so much.
And look at the 7900 XTX. Here it is, basically neck and neck with the 4080. And then the 4080 Super, a little bit ahead, but not really enough to matter unless you need DLSS and better ray tracing. Now the 5080 is another 10% ahead of that. So I guess, if anything, this makes the 5080 a more compelling alternative to a 7900 XTX, which are readily available and are at their, I think, lowest prices ever right now. So that's something to consider.
But you are giving up some nifty NVIDIA features.
Yeah. And here we are again, another 10, 11 frames per second faster at 4K than a 4080 Super overall. This is from Tech Power Up. And yeah, it is faster.
You know what really stinks?
It's not a lot faster. What?
You can't get a 4080 Super anymore. They've really they started discontinuing them around November. I remember seeing a couple of sales around September where the 4080s dropped down to, around 960, 950. And everybody thought, oh, well, the 5080 is going to come out and it's going to be so much better. Well, there's no stock anymore of anything really over a 4070. I tried to look up a 4070 Ti Super the other day, and there's nothing available under $1,200.
Oi.
So you're just, unless you buy on eBay.
Only my little lady twice on Sundays.
Yeah, and the back in the day, when the next generation came out, the previous generation stuff, they tried to clear out stock, but NVIDIA is really on top of that whole stock situation. They know how many chips that they ship a year, and they really cut back on the 4000 series at the higher end. So we have nothing to, kind of try to price against, and which is kind of interesting when we look at the pick of the week. Anyway, that's just a small hint to stick around.
On the subject of the 5080, over at Phoronix, who, by the way, they did already a 5090 Linux GPU compute performance review, which showed even bigger gains than on the gaming side.
It's insane.
The 5080 was tested at Phoronix for compute performance. Let me find one of their nice summaries here.
3 or 4, I think.
It's not huge. If you look at the 4090 versus the 5090, it's big. The difference in compute performance is really big. So the 5090 is a generational improvement over the
More.
4090 if you're just talking about compute.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
the 50,
more than a generation. It's huge.
the 5080, though,
Hey.
it's only the same kind of slight uplift that we're seeing on the gaming side.
Here's the problem. And this may explain some of that performance with the 5090. So my day job, I work with machine learning teams, and we use the 3090 24 gig cards for a lot of our stuff. And we're like, hey, we can get this, faster one, but it's only got 16 gigs. And all the machine learning people are like, please just shut your mouth, because our models, we have to cut them back to be, at the 24 gig spot. So don't you dare take any of our memory away, because that's far more important to us than the performance of the card. And so depending on the model you're using, if you go from 24 gig to 32, it's a big deal. Isn't that what the 4090 was? It was a 24 gig card, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So memory is still king in these things. And so a lot of people will be scrambling for the 5090s because they do offer 32 gigs of memory where you don't have to prune away your model so much that it can fit into 24 gigs of space. So it's kind of a big deal. The memory, that is. But yeah, they do have a lot more AI stuff, tensor cores, and they've redesigned a bunch of the stuff in there, so it will help with AI. But you take a look and see the 5080 that has a much smaller chip, but it's half the memory size, and that's a massive difference in between those results. Yeah,
And that's, when we talked last week, the only numbers we had seen on the 5090 at that point were Sebastian's. We hadn't seen any numbers on 4K, and that's where it's like Josh is saying, it's the memory, because the silicon itself is not that much faster because it's the same architecture. There's a lot more cores on a 5090 than a 4090. But the memory bandwidth and that 32 gigs of memory, the 5090 is 15 to 20% faster at 1080 and 1440 than a 4090. But at 4K, where that memory can sort of be used and use that extra pipeline, the 5090 actually really does have a significant advantage over the 4090 at 4K. I was very surprised when I saw those numbers the next day, and it's all because of that extra memory and the extra memory bandwidth.
Yeah. If anything, Josh, are you muted?
Yeah, I said it's almost double the bandwidth of memory. It's like
it's crazy.
terabyte per second on the 4090 and 1.8 on the 5090. Yeah, it's nuts.
If anything, last week, because we were still early and I hadn't even finished all my testing, I stayed up all night that night, but if anything, we downplayed the performance of it because it really is closer to 25% across the board and higher at 4K. I don't remember actually seeing anything that was 15%. It was all like 20s, even low 30s over the 4090 in the same tests, and I was doing like 3440 by 1440 ultra wide testing.
We could argue 1%, but other than that, you're right.
The reality of that card is, like, to Kent's point, it's so similar to the previous architecture that it really just scales with the CUDA core count, with memory bandwidth, and with the power. So it's 25% more power, it's roughly 25% more performance, and it's 25% more expensive. It's more of everything. And people who are upset about the power draw, I get it because it's the easiest thing to point to. Like, but what kind of power? But first of all, if you're an enthusiast and you want a powerful car, and you're presented with the option of upgrading your engine to a V8 from, say, a 6-cylinder or a 4-cylinder engine, and it's going to guzzle gas, you're going to get way worse, gas mileage, but way more performance. if all you want is performance, you don't care about the gas. You don't care about the fuel consumption. And so it's just like, do you want the card that delivers way more performance at also way more power? Or do you say, no, I'm more concerned about power draw?
I'd like to congratulate you, Sebastian, on bringing back the car and video card analogy. I thought that died out 20 years ago, but you are like the hipster of car analogies.
I'm just trying. Brett's not here, so we can't make a car segment. Right. What about Tesla Plaid?
I mean, we could,
you're
but
right.
it's not going to.
It's a stupid analogy, and I'll just cut all this out of the podcast because really, an electric car.
It's not a stupid analogy.
Well, then I put a bigger battery system on the rear axle to give me more power. Now you're saying that it's not as efficient, but I'm getting way better acceleration. Does it really matter?
Well,
does it matter the top speed of my Tesla?
Here's the one thing.
No, I put a few super caps in it.
TSMC 4N. It's the same process. More I learned about it, it mainly was design layout that NVIDIA stuffed in 92 billion transistors and went from 600 and some odd millimeter square to 740 millimeter square. Something close to the damn reticle limit. And so it's still the same process node. They've probably done some small iterative improvements, not only in the design, but also at the fab, because a lot of the fab engineers work really hand in hand with the people who design these large chips. I mean, TSMC has a whole cadre of engineers that work very closely with these design teams from their third party silicon designers. And so you're going to get some improvements in efficiency in terms of power just because they know the process a little bit better. They probably improve some of the libraries, stuff that won't break it, but will improve it, and apply that to the designs. And so it is a much larger chip, but relatively speaking, it's not sucking the juice like you would expect it to be that much bigger. So there are improvements, but it's still just a really stonking big chip.
Don't you think that if you look at the video that NVIDIA put out about the design of the new Founders Edition card for the 5090 and how they had considered putting out a quad slot card, they had considered that unique orientation for the PCB and having it flat on the bottom of this 4-slot width card. And then when they revised the PCB design and decided they could do like a 2/3 pass-through heatsink and make it 2 slots, then they said, okay, well, now we can go ahead and do that 600-watt card because it's not quad slot. We didn't want to do quad slot. So this really is just the even higher flagship that they didn't release last time around. This is the 5090 Ti. And next generation, we'll probably see new architecture from the ground up and possibly lower power draw.
So what's that? Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, it's going to go nowhere but down. I mean, we are kind of, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it. I think we're hitting the ragged edge of what OEMs are really willing to shoulder, even for high end stuff. And so I don't think that it's this could be the highest. And one thing I'd like to say, North Ranger on Discord, he said, this is not like Kepler to Maxwell while you're still on 28 nanometer. And I think that you're absolutely right. NVIDIA did find some secret sauce in their design methodology to make Maxwell so much more efficient, even on the same process node. But
I think they used a silver hammer. I wonder if
some of these... What's that?
I think they used a silver hammer.
They may have. But, I wonder if some of these design tricks are running out, but that's not to say that we may not see a rise of dynamic, what do they call, not NMOS, but gosh darn it, dynamic transistors, dynamic power transistors. It's like a middle ground in between, custom layout. Versus
yes.
But anyway, I mean, design stuff will continue to improve. But yeah, it was like, kind of the perfect storm with Maxwell, that they came upon this design methodology that was so much superior from the previous generation. And we haven't seen that yet. And yeah, it's going to be TSMC 3 nanometer is going to be the next jump. And that's going to be a while. 2 years?
Yeah,
2 years.
probably.
NVIDIA even talked a lot about, there was a media event before the launch, and they were explaining the architecture. They did a lot on the power efficiency side of things, aggressive gating, and it's still pulling, 575 watts. So it's just, like Josh said, it's just the limits, the ragged edge of what this architecture can do.
And people are sort of harping on the efficiency in 575 watts, but as someone with a 4090, my 4090 has rarely ever run at the stock power limit. I've pretty much cranked it up to 550 watts, and I know that most 4090 owners have increased their power limits. So. Yeah. You're getting a lot more performance, and really you do get a little performance, but not a whole lot on a 4090 cranking it up to the same power limits as you would see on a 5090. So there is an efficiency gain there, even though it's using more power.
Yeah. Moving on to AMD graphics, and I'll just go straight to this Twitter post. It was a videocards.com story. Retailer confirms PowerColor Radeon RX 9070 XT Red Devil Limited Edition is in stock. Talks AMD pricing strategy. This article, if you haven't read it, he was talking about how the price was too high and they're reconsidering everything. And I don't know if this is the one where they talked about the possibility of AMD having to send out rebates so that the prices can come down. Everybody's just holding on to their stock. The product is ready. I guess the drivers aren't ready yet, but Frank Azor, founder of Alienware, I believe, back in the day. Was it Alienware?
I think.
No.
He's done a lot.
Who was the one who was at BFG? Maybe he was the BFG guy.
No, that was gosh dang it, Herkelman.
Oh, Scott Herkelman. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I got him confused.
I think you're right.
Replaced
Frank was
Herkelman.
Alienware.
Yeah, Frank was okay. So Frank Azor responded to this on X, formerly Twitter, and said, while we aren't going to comment on all the price rumors, I can say that an $899 USD starting price point was never part of the plan.
So I can't comment on price rumors except for giving you price rumors.
I like how he stayed in this thread. Like, it would be better if AMD officially announced the price of the GPUs, says one person, and he says, we will, but they haven't yet. So the speculation continues, and
do you want to hear my multiple levels of speculation about why AMD's or do you?
Yes, I do. But here, by the way, is this story from Guru 3D that AMD wanted to ask $899 for the XT, and yeah, and then quoting Frank Azor, of course, from that same tweet. So,
Frank.
So Josh, please.
Okay, I think there are multiple reasons behind why AMD has done what they've done. One, I think that they know how much product NVIDIA is actually going to be delivering because they all use the same suppliers. They all use the same wafer guys, TSMC. They know how many wafers are being produced what and in what lots and for who because they have to schedule in there. They've got to buy all of that stuff. It's like an open secret. And so I think that they actually had some reasonable supply, but they could improve upon it. They also probably have understood and through their partners testing know the performance of the 5000 series, that it is not a generational jump. We know that the big Navi was canceled some years back, and there are multiple reasons for that. One, 3 years ago when this was being initially developed, AMD was still not in, the dominant position it is right now in terms of especially server chips, desktop efficiency, getting 3D Vcache up and running like it's supposed to, enhancing that with the 9000 series and 9800X 3D, which is kind of a marvel of engineering. They don't have the resources NVIDIA has. They did not have the resources that Intel had. And so they really had to mix up their engineering talent the best way that they knew how. Now, the GPU guys were always going to work on the GPUs, but you had these strict CPUs that were coming out that they really wanted to enhance, the graphics portion. They wanted to focus their guys on a mid-range card, because even though the mainstream wants these high-end cards, they can't afford it. And so the mainstream will be buying these, 7800 XTs or the 4070 Supers, two of the bigger selling cards of this generation, or the 4070. And so it seems to make sense to focus your engineering talents on making the best mid-range chip you could that would, span that $500 to $900 range, and just ignore the high end, which you're going to be selling, under 10,000 units. But those big chips, when you send those wafer orders in, you're going to have a lot of defects throughout the entire thing. At cutting edge process technology, you've got to have a whole lot more design work done on these big chips to make sure they run properly. And so it seems like a combination of things have kind of come around. That one, we've only got this, mid-range chip from AMD. They see what the competition is doing. They saw the performance that they were getting out of these, and they're thinking, this isn't nearly the jump that we were expecting. We really need to, one, take a look at our strategy of, how much we're going to charge for it, what kind of performance we're going to end up getting out of these, what kind of, BIOS tweaks and speed and feeds that we can get out, that the stuff already produced can hit the marks that we're looking at. And and work on the latest version of FSR and drivers to get it the best position possible. And 2 months of driver and software development is a lot of time. And especially if they were hammering towards the end to try to get it done, then suddenly it's like, hey, we're delaying this 2 months. If you've ever worked on a software project that was getting close to the end, and suddenly you're given 2 months of extra time to do all of these things that you still need to do. No, you don't. It doesn't work that way, Jeremy. No, it does,
just, but it doesn't.
Oh, 2 more months. Okay. Well, then everybody's.
Oh, I'm going to go on vacation this next week. No, it should help out.
Add some bloat. Yeah. We can add some more bloat now. Can I counter?
Can we get another middle manager in here for 2 weeks?
Can I counter what Josh just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The discussion is good, because I'm not a know-it-all. I mean, I pretend to be a know-it-all, but I'm not a know-it-all.
You play one on the internet.
I posit that AMD already knew what performance was going to be like, because they had the leaks just like everybody else did. What they didn't know was price. Why would they yank the Radeon from their presentation at CES and essentially unlaunch the card? I don't think it's any secret that the cards were already being seeded and that retailers already had the retail packages. Mm-hmm. Why would they unlaunch the card pending review, pending driver modifications and pricing strategy reevaluation? When obviously, if NVIDIA's next graphics cards were on the same process node and they weren't going to be a huge generational uplift, I think that what was really surprising to AMD was that Jensen comes out on stage and, yeah, the flagship is more expensive, but everything else is the same price. I think there was an expectation that everything was going up a couple $100. That's, to me,
seems reasonable
the most
in these
obvious answer. Now, the other thing that could have been surprising to AMD is DLSS 4X frame generation. I don't know if that was rumored beforehand. I was surprised by 4. I could just be out of the loop. Maybe everybody already knew that. But for them to say that they're focusing on the software and FSR 4, they could be looking at trying to emulate that, maybe going up to 4X, like
that
a
would be hard
interpolation
to
on the
do in
display
2
sites.
Yeah.
And
as Al Bundy asked, he wants to know if AMD dropped the chiplet strategy. Yes, it looks like it is a single monolithic die for the latest AMD
It's kind of like Intel,
RX
like the
9070.
current generation of Intel desktop processors. It's one and done. I think we've seen that there are too many issues with latency with their design to make it the chip that they wanted it to be. It's been, 3 months, and we still don't have anywhere near the performance that was expected out of those products. Chiplets are difficult to do. It took AMD a couple generations to really iron out the kinks and get it to the point where now they just have the class-leading desktop processor. But
Yeah, well, I mean, they also bought a company called C Micro some decades ago that had a really good Freedom Fabric that they just, again, iterated upon. And that was kind of their future, and they knew it. And yeah, I mean, their Ryzen 3000 series, I mean, it was a little bit slower than some of us were hoping for in terms of core-to-core communication, but it wasn't bad. And it, improved from the 5000, 7000, and now 9000 series. So they had the right thing for CPUs, but I don't think chiplets work very well for GPUs. It's just too bandwidth and latency dependent, especially memory accesses. And because, even when we had talked, and I know that we're going off on a tangent, one of the things that AMD wanted to do with the chiplets, the memory controlled chiplets, they have cache on there. And so they're like, hey, if we double the cache on these chiplets, we should get a tremendous amount more performance. And they did that, and they tested it, and it was a couple percent. It was not worth the silicon costs to do that, to get any kind of real uplift performance. And so when you're talking GPUs and chiplets, I don't know. I don't have a good answer there. I mean, HBM memory with an interposer and a chip was fantastic. It was more expensive to produce, and Raj and I actually had a very small discussion online about that, and it was kind of enlightening. But yeah, it's when you're doing distributed compute somehow, it just is almost an order of magnitude slower, even when you're using, these high speed interconnects that they're developing, and especially what like Intel has with their chips. It's hard to do effectively.
Was that HBM 1 or 2?
That was HBM 1 with the Vega originally.
Because I was going to say it's gotten better over the years. Not generationally, but it's gotten better.
Oh, wait, no, HBM is scaled really, really, really nicely, and they've improved the densities dramatically. The problem is that the pricing has scaled dramatically as well. It's 3 times more expensive to use HBM than a standard memory chip. And even though, back in this is when I talked to Raj about, it's like with Vega, is like, what was the bill of materials, and how expensive was it to do HBM with even an interposer versus just a standard graphics chips? And he said interposers were super cheap. Integrating them was not all that expensive, but it just took more time. And time in this case is money. But when you're looking at the cost of, a standard, PCB in memory versus HBM, he was saying it's like 1.2 times the cost. So 20% increase in overall costs. But right now, with the AI boom and everything, HBM memory is just 3 to 4 times higher than it really needs to be. It's not the integration costs that is. It's just these guys are producing these high margin pieces of memory for this AI thing that they're selling individual chips for $15,000 to $20,000 a piece, and these giant racks for $150,000 filled with GPUs that use HBM. And so these guys
there's no reason to drive the memory down or the price down because it's selling.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's trouble in paradise for NVIDIA and the AI boom as we seamlessly transition to our next story. I'm first going to show you a screenshot from Yahoo Finance where they're talking about the fact that on Monday, NVIDIA lost 17% of its market value in one day. And it rebounded a little bit, but then it was down again today, I think, in after hours trading. So it's not doing great because of this thing called DeepSeek. And DeepSeek, if you're not aware, is a competitor to ChatGPT, right? It's a competitor to OpenAI.
They're the competitor to OpenAI.
And it's just a lot of people who are very skeptical about it, probably because their positions in NVIDIA are being threatened. But they are also pointing to the fact that this is out of China. It's just as concerning as TikTok, if not more so. And look at all the data they're collecting and all this stuff. But ultimately, it's something that is much less demanding on hardware and actually potentially runs better on AMD graphics than NVIDIA graphics. So here's a story from Tom's Hardware from 8 hours ago. With DeepSeek AI, the tables have turned according to AMD. AMD claiming that the RX 7900 XTX outperforms a 4090 in DeepSeek benchmarks. So
Look, it's David again.
Very interesting.
So there's a lot. Okay, and I've actually dug into this a little. I'm by far not an expert. There's a lot going on that a lot of individual investors and some of these, institutional investors, it just kind of shows that they don't really know a whole lot about AI. It's a very new thing for them. And so a lot of their decisions are based on kind of histrionics. And this is kind of that case because they claims like, hey, we trained this model for only $5.6 million, except that 2 years ago they bought like $100 million worth of NVIDIA GPUs that they trained this model on. Now, what they're doing is impressive in terms of programming, how they're training the models and all that. It does in reality lower the overall cost of getting a model to market. But there are still a lot of constraints on what the model can do, how accurate it is, and some of the stuff that they utilized on this model from before that was done in a more traditional way. Now, NVIDIA has been aiming at, decreasing the overall costs and all these other guys because they know it takes a lot of performance to train these models, and over the past 5 years, we've seen a massive decrease in the performance required to complete this. But we've also had a massive increase in the performance of the chips doing this. Even though this is a kind of cheaper way to do it, a lot of people think, who are kind of in the know, is that it will actually expand the market for these models, and the amount of performance that you need to actually implement this for the scale they're looking at is still just as much as what they were expecting. And so the dip was weird, and eventually it's going to go up because we're going to go quarter after quarter, and NVIDIA is going to say, we're still selling these amount of chips and we're making this many billions of dollars. But, I could be wrong. It could, actually revolutionize and drop the performance needs of these models with what they've released. But some of the AI guys that I've talked to and interacted with, they're like, this is kind of an evolutionary thing that we're working for. There are different workloads that still require a lot more performance than what they're doing. So we'll see. But it's not the end of the world for NVIDIA and AMD and Intel and everybody who's trying to, do this.
Because, obviously there's been some tweaks to the language that they're using as to how much money was involved in getting this company up and running. And, the whole idea that they're doing it on incredibly low-powered or low-end NVIDIA hardware. In a way, you've got to say that to be legal because it's been illegal for NVIDIA to send their hardware, their top-end hardware, to China for a while.
There's export versions that they have to do. So, yeah, you're correct there.
Yes, so they're cut down. But those are still high cost. So we will see, but mostly I think it is the AI investors who've, at this point had a bunch of money thrown at them for very little return. And so they got to jump on the next big thing to do. But hands down, the funniest part about all of this is OpenAI's response, which is that they're very, very deeply upset that DeepSeek has used all of the data that OpenAI stole from the internet to train
exactly
their own thief machine. I just, this is ironic in the actual literal sense of the term, is that, you know, I am upset that they're doing this, and it's totally unbelievable that someone would do that. It's against any sort of ethical behavior. Dude, it's exactly what you did to train your models in the first place.
Yeah.
yes. So one scam company ripping off another, and so the AI wheel turns. But yeah, moving on to hardware.
And the vulture capitalist
Yay,
will benefit.
capitalism.
Okay, so
Yep.
the 1080 Ti is one of those cards where you have to pry it from some people's cold, dead hands. But
R.I.P.
here's a story from Ars Technica. NVIDIA is starting to wind down support for older GPUs, including the 10 series. Now, it mentions the 1060 here, but I believe the 1080 Ti would also be.
It is. The 1060 is mentioned because it spent about 4 or 5 years as the number one card being used on the Steam hardware survey. It's fallen to like 12th or 13th place now. But still, like, there are a lot of systems using these generation. Like, literally, the 1060 is still in 12th place, which is higher than any card from AMD or Intel on the Steam hardware. It's only anything about 5.66% or something like that. But still, that is a good chunk. There's still a lot of 1080 Ti's and 1080s out there. And someone who's faced with this, that there's not going to be any more driver updates relatively soon. This is not imminent. This is going to happen, but not like next month. What are you going to update to? Like, what is there in like the $200 to $300 budget? And I went, when I was looking at this, I went American prices, not Canadian, because, well, obvious reasons. You outnumber us. But for a hard budget of $200, when I took a look at this, you can get like an RX 580, an RTX 2060, or maybe, if it's on sale, an RTX 3050 6GB. These are not compelling upgrade options, right? This is not amazing. If you can go up as high as $300 with a 3060 12 gig, but maybe a 3050 80 or 8 gig, there's still this huge chunk of the market that NVIDIA really doesn't have. And frankly, to be honest, only Intel does. Where, hey, if you are suddenly forced that driver updates are not coming, games stop working for you, you need a new card. But you're not dropping $999. It's ugly. It has been for a while, but this is an interesting sort of move. And I totally understand. Maxwell, Pascal, and Volta, it's been a while. So here it is. It had to come. I don't know if anyone else got any comments on this, but I see this as sort of like a really tough decision for a lot of people.
It's been a while, but then think about it. A lot of people who are on a 10 series did not upgrade to the RTX 20 series. They didn't see it as enough of an improvement. It was RTX. Who cares about RTX? And then by the 30 series, the gains were so substantial. It was a very compelling update, but they were impossible to buy because of the mining craze. So now we have the 40 series, which are, of course, going to be very quickly phased out in favor of the 50 series. And I don't know. I guess it seems...
So the 1650?
You know, to me, it sounds kind of strange saying it from a guy who's had every 90 series and 80 Ti series for ages. But for most people, I feel like the B580 is the most compelling card to come from anybody in probably the last 5 to 6 years.
Yep.
For most people. If you just want to play games and you're not playing in 4K or ultra wide, even up to 1440p, that card's got excellent performance, and it's $250 when it's in stock, which it's not
when
right
it's
now.
in stock. Yes, as is being pointed out in the chat. It's never
Wait.
in stock.
Did you just say B580?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you have one, Josh, but you're rare.
Josh has it in stock.
By the way, this segment of the podcast is not in any way sponsored by the
Intel.
industry-leading Intel Arc B580. Buy one at your local retailer today. It has a compelling mix of features and performance at a price that you can actually afford.
Sorry, stand-in Brett, where are we supposed to buy it from?
Micro Center. Visit
Micro Center.
Micro
There we
Center,
go. Yeah.
a Micro Center near you, and save not only on AMD Ryzen 9800X3D processors when they're in stock. All right, moving to the next story. Bleeping Computer, Windows 11 24H2 is finally the mainstream Windows 11. It's not fringe anymore. It's being offered to all Windows 10 PCs, in fact, all eligible ones anyway. So it's broad deployment.
And they've
phase
expanded
now.
the definition of eligible quite a bit over the the couple of years.
That's good because you know what? Since Microsoft uses the end user for quality control and product testing now, if it's being widely deployed, then we're just going to get so much more customer feedback. It's going to get better. There'll be new patches. And eventually, 24H2 will be that solid choice that you can depend on for all your Copilot-powered Windows needs.
In 26H1.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm bitter or anything.
No. And on that note, we're going to swing on over to Insecurity Corner.
Welcome to Insecurity Corner, your weekly reason to drink.
Our first story, it concerns Apple. Those fancy Apple silicon processors, M2, M3, M4, leaking data? How can this be possible? Speculative execution rears its head again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is why Brett called in sick.
It's fake news.
Because, this whole Cortex series, there are two different flaws, both of which are the very familiar to anyone who uses a computer, speculative execution flaws. So you can either get slapped or flapped. Slapped or flopped. Either way, it kind of hurts. The flop is only going to affect the people with money. They have an M3 or an M4. The slap will get everyone, M2 straight through to M4. But what we're looking at is taking advantage of how these ARM Cortex processors predict how they're going to address memory. And in this case, what they can do is be trained to expect a certain pattern of memory access and then flip. All of a sudden, it's done in a different way, which leads to an incorrect prediction. This can be done on any bloody misconfigured website you would like to visit. You can protect yourself by disabling JavaScript and thus disemboweling the web pretty much for you completely, because that disease has taken root everywhere. There's no way we're getting rid of it at this point. Other than that, you have to wait for a patch. But in all cases, what this is doing is grabbing a little bit of secure or encrypted data, which then allows it to suddenly escape the sandbox you're in Safari and, grab random data off of what you have been doing. So passwords, emails, in a very common trait nowadays, location data, both past and present. And in the second case, the speculative load address prediction, the SLAP, it is much easier to grab a whole bunch of things because, on the one hand, it runs once, leverages this issue where it grabs memory addresses and grabs a little bit out of it. First time, you don't get much, but you can keep doing it over and over again as long as this web page is running, or whatever the web page downloaded to your machine is running, but it doesn't need to. There is no user intervention whatsoever. So it feeds the pattern, changes it, feeds the pattern, changes it. And now it's grabbing your Gmail, it's grabbing your Amazon orders, it's grabbing whatever live sessions you have. This is Marshall Banana. The one is specifically Safari, but honestly, if you're running any other browser on an Apple chip that has a sandbox function, it's going to get it. This is what it's going after, is memory addresses, or in the flop case, the data stored in the memory. It's not good. It's really not good. But as a PC user, I try and care.
Next in Insecurity Corner, our final story, actually, just 2 stories this week. QNAP fixes 6 rsync vulnerabilities in NAS backup and their recovery app. So that's good. It's good to have fixes instead of just saying buy new hardware.
I mean, yes, but I'd like to be able to trust SSH. And this is yet another thing that is used to deal with network attached storage devices over SSH. And it is your old classic remote code execution. So it's been tracked. It's horrific, but it's kind of boring. And then it's just like heap buffer overflows and servers leaking arbitrary client files of stuff that you're just bypassing stuff that should already have been fixed. But the problem is that we are living in a giant house of cards, and occasionally, every once in a while, figures out how to flip that card out, and no one saw that coming. But yeah, so if you are running anything of QNAPs, try and update. You might be out of band, you might not be able to get the updates anymore, but other than that, just log in as an admin, hit the App Center, and just search for the, I think it's HBS3 Backup Hybrid Center. Just hit the update and do it, because otherwise you're going to be having a bad day.
Since Brett's not here to add to these Insecurity Corner stories, we're going to just move right on.
Do you want more?
No.
No.
We can talk about TP-Link.
Quick hits.
Yep, we could.
Gaming. Jeremy, you wrote something about South of Midnight. You called it tempting and said it had unique folklore.
Well, there's how many video games can you name immediately that were based on the folklore from like Alabama and other places in the deep south of the US? That's what I thought. So this game, I mean, from looking at the videos, it's not going to appeal to everyone because it's a mix of sort of like, what is that series where it's a bunch of cutscenes where you have to make choices with the kids? But it looks like it's a mix of a lot of cutscenes and interesting video with Souls-like combat. But it's set in Southern Gothic mythology. This is not something the video games have really, explored very much. So
kind of like how Black Myth Wukong explored the Monkey King, that, in a way that
has been explored numerous times.
Well, not in video games.
Journey to the West, yeah. But no, I didn't mention that because everything is European. There's a slight nod towards the Orientals. I mean, Ninja Gaiden just came out like 4 times this week in different forms. So it's sort of interesting that the trailer has some good music going with it. I don't know if I'm going to love it, but I'm kind of interested to explore something that's a little bit different than these tropes we're used to nowadays.
This story from our Second way more game makers are working on PC titles than ever, according to this survey.
Yeah, but you can quickly port a PC game over to Xbox and PS5 because it's all x86, especially Xbox since it's Windows-based and DirectX.
And the new Switch is going to have Xbox games on it, according to Microsoft.
That's what they say.
So it's going to be a level playing field out there almost.
Almost.
But of course, you're
magnetic attachable controllers.
Look at all those Steam games. Just ever more titles.
Gabe is so happy.
Is it the Steam Deck effect? Is it because of all those? How many ROG allies do you think you're sold? Well, how many Steam Decks do you think you're sold?
I don't think that many.
More than 2.
I know one
Yeah.
person with a Steam Deck, but everybody has a PC, it seems, or a laptop at least, something.
And now even integrated graphics can run pretty heavy games. Not super heavy, but I mean you got to adjust. But 1080p gaming is definitely in the realm of the integrated stuff, and going to be interested to see what AMD's next gen Strix things actually bring to the table, because there's a lot of rumors about actual performance being significantly higher than what we've seen before. So that'll be fun and exciting when that time comes.
Speaking of things being fun and exciting when the time comes, Doom: The Dark Ages. Do you think this is going to be good?
Honestly, I think they should have tried to say that the release date would be April 1st, but that's me. No, May 15th, 2025 is the leak. It was, it was a bit of a game of telephone. It was a French website that grabbed it when an English website saw that, and then someone at Rock, Paper, Shotgun saw that. But hey, seems to be relatively a good idea because there's several other games releasing that day. So we'll see.
Why would you want to play that when you could play Doom in Microsoft Word?
Sorry, boss. I'm just working on this Word project. See? You remember how a couple of episodes ago we warned you that you could play Doom in a PDF, but it was horrific as to the reason why? Well, yeah, that's pretty much the same damn thing. It's essentially a macro that will bork the Microsoft, well, not bork, but it takes advantage of the Microsoft Word, one of their DLLs, in a way that should not be able to be possible. And so it actually uses something called get a sync key state to grab input from the various controls you were using. Not so much the mouse, it's keyboard. But it will actually allow you to move around and just completely go through Doom in Word. There's no reason for this. This should not be a thing. Oh, and if you're wondering, it's only 6.6 megabytes, the entire damn download. That's smaller than a lot of the Word documents that people use constantly in my job at work.
So isn't it kind of interesting? Go ahead. Finish up.
No, I don't want to. I just want to.
Isn't it kind of interesting that some years back we started to see browsers become essentially miniature OSs running on your OS, because you could run all these apps inside browsers. And it seems like with Microsoft 365 and what they've done with Excel, that they're again,
you mean Microsoft 359
operating systems that run apps instead of being apps themselves, because that doesn't lead to any kind of security issues whatsoever. None.
No, I have no nightmares about that at all.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Zanza Loki, I was there when Doom was released. It came on 1.44 megabyte floppies.
Yes, it was not 2.
4 or 5.
You got the double-sided version. High density
2.88 floppies? No.
Yep.
Nobody had those.
Well, apparently someone did.
Were you there when Windows 95 came out on like?
Yeah, it was called Windows 4. Chicago was the code name. So yes, I was following it
on floppy disk, because it was also out on CD-ROM. But you could order the floppies.
Yeah, but it was like 18, 20 floppies.
Yeah, it was a lot of floppies.
Oh yeah, it was. But it was much better than 3.1, which we used to slow down some games. To the frame rate was just too high when you ran it through DOS. So you had to load Windows and then load the game, and then you could play like Wing Commander 2, and it wasn't just like. Woo!
But you could make little icons for all your DOS applications in Windows 3.1.
True.
It was so nice. All right. Shall we move to picks of the week? Josh,
Sure.
please.
You know
get
what?
us-
This is I don't know, are you brave? Do you really want to upgrade your video card and you just don't see any other options in the next couple of months? Well, this is one of my favorite cards of the last 2 years. I have 3 of them, the RX 7800 XT, the RTX 4070 Ti Super, and then this one, the XFX RX 7900 XT. Yes, you get 20 gigs of video card memory. It runs pretty quick. It's right at that, 4070 Ti, 4070 Ti super speed, which means that it's going to run around 5070 speeds, and the price at $679 is looking competitive to what you get. So it's available now. I don't know for how long. XFX makes a pretty robust card, and that's an inexpensive price, relatively speaking. But you got to think, what is the 9070 going to look like when it finally hits? Is it going to be around that price range? Is it going to have significantly better ray tracing performance? Probably will, but yeah, it's available now. So if you need an upgrade, I think you'd still be happy with this in the next couple of years to come, if you're in that price range.
Jeremy, your pick.
So, trying to make a Wi-Fi network larger or go through obnoxious obstacles is hard to explain to someone. They want a repeater or an extender where it relies on an already questionable Wi-Fi signal that it's then going to, expand. And there are WAPs that do a great job but require management software. So I've been being annoyed with an extender that I borrowed from my neighbor to try and get stuff into the backyard. Not so important in January, but hey, I'm planning ahead. And the only way to do it is hardwired. You take something from your router and you wire it, and that becomes the new Wi-Fi booster. And so I was browsing around, and it's usually crap. And it's like, oh, I found one that was on sale very nicely up here in Canada that isn't Ubiquiti, because I was kind of leaning that way, but I went TP-Link because it's 21% off. It's going to support just about anything you want. It's Wi-Fi 6. It does MuMimo. It does pretty much everything. And I mean, sorry, Ubiquiti has kind of annoyed me in the past a little bit, so I want to try TP-Link. It may be that this also annoys me, but it's Amazon, so I can send it back. It hasn't arrived yet, so I can't tell you exactly how good it is. But I'm kind of curious how this is going to work. But yes, if you're extending your Wi-Fi network, don't do it wirelessly. Buy some flat wire. Buy anything. Just get mesh systems. Hey, this supports it. I don't know. I'm not overly impressed by a lot of the people I've talked to with them. That could be based on, the wiring and such.
Yeah, so get your TP-Link while you still can. Before.
Yeah, but Jeremy's in Canada. He can still probably get it.
Oh,
yeah, I can get this anytime I feel like.
That's right.
Yeah.
You have that freedom. Brett is not here, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, but he made a pick anyway. He put this in our show notes. Believe it or not, it's Micro Center. And it's the Radeon RX 7900 XTX, because depending on where you are, it's defaulted to the Fairfax location here. You can go in and buy an XTX for as little as $849.99. Let me see. That's in his neck of the woods. What about Michigan? There is a store in Madison Heights. Let's see. Sold out. Okay. So I can't get it here in Michigan, but apparently if you live in Virginia, People just don't buy graphics cards, so they're in stock there. Brett's always saying, "Oh, I got it in stock here. Oh, it's in stock at Micro Center." Well, yeah,
Yeah, he lives in the Goldilocks Micro Center zone.
Yes, apparently he does.
so hey, a compelling price for those who actually have one near them. Because you go to a place like Newegg for stuff like this, it's just painful. Let me look at it right now, live. Since I don't have a pick this week, my pick will be just looking up the 7900 XTX.
Do they have
On
like a
Newegg.
2,000 watts power supply?
Sure. Let's see. So hey, look at this. $829.99 for the Sapphire Pulse.
Oh,
Look no further.
That's
The
a
Pulse
good
are almost
deal.
great cards.
God.
Because they perform as good or better than AMD reference cards. They're quieter. So Newegg comes through an even better deal than the Micro Center one.
And
Get
if you
yourself
want to
a
run
Pulse.
DeepSeek, apparently this is the card.
Take that,
Exactly.
Bront.
Yeah. All right, Kent, I'm sure you have a pick this week.
I do have a pick this week. You know, all the new tech that's coming out that has any enticing value is sold out. You can't get it. So screw it all and just, go wash your car with this, which is a cordless pressure washer. It's a Ryobi. I picked
I
one
got a
of these
battery for
up.
that.
Yeah. And actually, you can get adapters. I actually have a lot of DeWalt power tools, but the DeWalt pressure washer is actually not very good. This is much better. And you can get an adapter, use the DeWalt batteries in this. Nice thing, you can actually modify this and use standard quick release attachments on it. But this has attachments where you can like feed it out of a 5-gallon bucket. You can also attach a 2-liter soda bottle to this and use that. And this is actually nice. On the back of our house, we don't have a spigot. We can't run a hose around to it. But yeah, now we can use this with like a bottle or a 5-gallon bucket and pressure wash at the back of our house where we need to, if that happens. But it's only 600 psi, but 600 psi is good for most people's general applications. It's great for washing a car that's, not in bad shape. If you've had a car sitting, outside for 3 or 4 years, you're going to need something a little heavier duty. But if you wash your car pretty regular, this thing will do a great job. Like I say, you can adapt it to use standard quick release. So you can put a foam cannon on there. Works great. And it's very reasonably priced.
I just love the idea that you could put a 2-liter of RC Cola on this thing and just blast people with.
I don't think that would work very well.
Why not? You said it could be adapted to use a 2-liter. It doesn't have to have water in it.
Let me
you're
put
going to
it
want
this way. I think that would work, but I don't know that the washer would continue to work very long afterward.
Oh, okay. Somebody in
Well, you clean it
YouTube
out with alcohol afterwards.
had brought up the, let's see, somebody said something about a super soaker. 600 PSI with water, that would be pretty intense. Running around, battery powered. Just saying. Looks like a lot of fun. $99, and the possibilities are almost endless. And you might get arrested, depending on how you use it.
So I worked at a truck wash in college, and our wands had 1,500 psi at the tip. You didn't want to put your finger close to that.
No.
But it's not as powerful as you think from like 2 or 3 feet away. We had to wash at least 1 foot away, get a little closer to get some of the bad things out. But if you put it right close to there, then yeah, it'd peel paint. But it's not as much as you think.
No, I put the 25-degree nozzle on and got to use this actually the first time today when I got home from work because it was actually a reasonable temperature. And
I was going to ask, where do you
car.
fit the antifreeze onto this so that you can wash the car?
But so it was I put the 25-degree tip on, and I wasn't sure how it was going to do, but like it blasted brake dust right off of my rims. No problem at all. It
And
did
paint,
a fine
too.
job.
You know, any of that pesky paint on your rims too, gone. I think it's time to wrap it up. It's been another week of exciting hardware developments, releases that are captivating, scintillating even. And so was the discussion tonight, if I may say so myself. We were on our game tonight. This is one of the best podcasts of 2025, easily.
Ever.
It's one of the best podcasts we've done since Brett was unable to join us last week or this week. I don't think it's better because Brett's not here. I realize now I'm digging myself a hole here. If Brett's watching this, I'm sorry. I think that there's a different energy when Brett's not here because we're not just all constantly ragging on Brett and mocking him and his Hackintosh
relentlessly
obsession and his.
We miss you, Brett. Come back
soon.
Bront.
And when we see him again, he's gonna be wearing a black mock neck with Levi's and white New Balance shoes, and he's gonna be
And a very large beveled edged phone.
Yes. In fact, maybe he'll have a chamfered haircut.
Maybe.
Ooh.
All right. Good night, everybody. And have a
Thank
pleasant
you,
tomorrow.
one and all.
Thanks for watching. Have a good week.
I'm not Chevy Chase, but you aren't either.